Whether you want more innovation more easily, you are feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, or you simply know that something isn't quite the way you know it can be, you are not alone. I hear the same from leaders every day. On Uncommon Leadership, we explore aligning personal fulfillment with business success, creating authentic teams, and cultivating the resilience, adaptability, and ease necessary to move beyond simply surviving today's challenges into thriving. I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams, and today we will uncover fresh insights into what it means to lead in these changeful times. Joining me is Everett O'Keefe. Everett is a dad, husband, and most recently a granddad. He is also an international #1 bestselling author and the founder of Ignite Press. Everett has helped more than 200 people become published bestselling authors, and he has a heart for helping people share their message with the world. Welcome, Everett.
Hey, thank you, Michael. I appreciate you having me on.
I have been looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise, I think we've... Go ahead, sorry.
You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that we've had this on calendar for a bit, and so I've been excited to be on your show, and had the joy of listening to some of your episodes as well. And so this is so I have been looking forward to this.
Great. Let's get into it. When did you first recognize that integrating your whole self and bringing that into everything that you do might be a valuable approach?
I want to say it was probably in my 30s. I think I spent my 20s like many people do, and I think there just came a time where I realized that I was going to get more by being who I was. I was going to be more successful and happy, and by being who I was rather than being someone I wasn't. And so probably in my 30s.
What was it that then brought that into focus as this might help a little bit?
Yeah, it's difficult to look back there and see, an exact moment. For me, I'm sure part of it had to do with being, at least for me personally, was fatherhood. I think going through fatherhood, having 3 kids and things like that. And, kids can see through you. We may think that we can put up facades that to show our kids only one side of us or whatever, but kids tend to see through us. And I've got to think that had to be part of it.
What is it about? So when people see through us like that, or when we feel seen through, at any rate, that could be pretty scary, especially when what other people seem to be seeing are parts of us that we either don't recognize are there, or we know they're there and we don't want to pay attention to. So what was it specifically with the way that your kids brought that out that helped you recognize, there's all these parts of me here that are really there to help, and if I could hook into them and bring them in to alignment with the rest of me, then we could have a pretty good time here.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I think for me it was that I started to see the bad parts of me coming out in my children. Like I remember a time when my oldest, I saw he was frustrated or angry, and he made this really ugly face, and I realized, where did he learn that ugly face? Well, I realized, oh wait, he learned that ugly face from me. And I was like, boy, I sure don't want to see more of that. And so that helped me understand that whatever I was, the worst parts of me were going to be reflected in my children. That also meant that hopefully the best parts of me would be reflected in my children. And so it's like seeing your own life through their lens. Like you talked about other people seeing what who you are, what you are, etc. I think that had to do with it. And the great part is, I think that's reflected, in my professional life ultimately. And of course, a lot of people think that they can isolate what stays at home, and they can separate work and home. But the truth is, we carry parts of both into both. And so, yeah, that's what I can think of, is just seeing me through the eyes of my kids, and that changing me.
Is that shift that you recognized for yourself, how much did that play into your desire then to help people tell their own stories and get that out to everyone else? So to help people
Yeah, it's
share their stories of their shift.
Yeah, I think that's one of my greatest joys, right? As a publisher, is indeed helping to share other people's messages, helping other people get their message out. And I have never seen myself. I've never seen myself so much as the messenger, so much as the facilitator of a message. And that takes a lot of pressure off me, Michael, I have to tell you, because to be the messenger, that's pressure. That is pressure. You've got to have a message and carry it all the way through. But there's a story in the Old Testament that is a perfect example of what I see my role and our company's role. There's a part in the Old Testament where the Israelites are fighting in a battle, and as long as Moses holds the staff of God high, they're winning. But when his arms get tired, as the day goes on and he gets hot and everything, his arms start to lower the staff, and the Israelites start losing. And two people come up next to him, Aaron and Hur, and they each grab an arm and they lift his arms up, and the Israelites ultimately have victory. And that's what I feel our job is. We're Aaron and Hur, right? We get to hold those arms up. We don't need to be Moses. There are other people who are called to be Moses. They have messages, sacred and not sacred, that they wish to take to the world, and we can help hold those arms up. And it's kind of funny when you think about it. To answer your question, what I learned in parenting absolutely applies there, because we're not going to craft the message of our children. We are not going to craft the direction of their life. They're going to make those choices. They're going to find their own missions in life. But we can hold their arms up. We can, when they're flagging, we can give them encouragement. When they're weak, we can give them strength. And every now and then, they'll also listen to some of our wisdom. Every now and then.
And to extend the metaphor a bit, I imagine that part of what you do as a publisher is help people craft their message, to fine-tune the phrasing, the rhythm, the words, and to maximize the impact of the people that they want to reach, rather than just being a megaphone that amplifies what they're saying unfiltered and unchanged.
Yeah, that's a balance to take, right? It's fortunately our editors have a sensitivity to the author voice, so they want to help the author communicate more effectively and more efficiently, but at the same time stay true to who the author really is, and what their core is. So I'm grateful that we have a team of editors that are sensitive to that as they engage in that process.
That is a tricky balance. It reminds me of I was sometime in elementary school in a creative writing assignment. One of my characters was a down country backwoods guy who used us and we randomly and not with the way that grammatically correct. And of course, that short story came back to me with all those corrected. So the teacher hadn't recognized what I was trying to do. She messed up my voice. And it must be so challenging as a publisher to understand where that line is, and where it's going to be for one person is very different from where it may be for someone else.
Yeah, very true, Michael. And that's what you bring up is a great example. It really depends upon the genre and the target audience. So, for instance, someone who's writing a book that's really meant to be written or really meant to be read by business executives is going to need to take a certain tone. And that's different than an 80-year-old person who wants to publish their memoir. And those different target market, different tone, different application, and voice is appropriate. At the same time, a lot of our clients are professionals. They are writing for the purpose of building helping to build their brand. And they're going to use their book as the most incredible and amazing and durable marketing piece they can ever create for their business. Well, they're already embedded in their target market. And so they speak to their target market every day in all of their communications. And so for those people, we really need to follow their lead in regards to how they communicate with their target market. And kind of a funny anecdote related to this. My wife is incredible and intelligent, and is also very, how would I say it? She's pretty traditional in her approach to communication. And when I'm speaking with my clients, sometimes I'll be quite casual. Like, for instance, I'll say, dude, that's amazing. That's really wonderful. And a couple times she's overheard me do something like that. And she'll say, honey, that's just not appropriate. You shouldn't be, you're talking to, to business executives, you're talking to clients all around the world. You shouldn't be saying, dude, and yet I know that that is part of an authentic and casual and friendly communication that I think is absolutely appropriate with my clients. But will I write that in a book for business executives? I'm probably not going to reference them by calling them dude in the middle of the book, right? But it is interesting that it does require some sensitivity to the target market and the goal of the book. What's it for? What's it to accomplish? All of these factor in. She's going to hate that I use that story, by the way.
It can be just between you and me and our.
Thank you. Let's hope she doesn't hear this podcast episode.
I'll leave it to you to make sure that it doesn't show up in her podcast feed.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we've been talking about you and the authors that you work with, and it strikes me that everything that we've said equally applies to leaders working with their people, both in communicating with each other within the team and communicating outside the team laterally and vertically. That the right way to talk to other engineers on your team may be very different than the right way to talk with the other managers, peer to your manager, which may be different than you need to talk to the executives. And part of what an uncommon leader understands how to do and can do well is to help their people optimize their communication for each of those different audiences, whether that's tone, style, voice, everything else.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you've had the opportunity now. How many episodes are you in on your podcast now? Roughly.
Published we're in the 70s for published.
Okay, so This is what's amazing is you as a result, you've had the opportunity, and I know you've got other episodes in the can or in development, right? You have the opportunity to interview 70 plus experts on communication and leadership, and what an advantage to be able to get some of those insights. I was listening to one of the episodes earlier that was with Melissa, and I'm trying to remember her last name, Melissa Apple, and I'm probably mispronouncing her name. And you were asking her about that balance of letting people in and being really communicating openly and honestly, and sharing details of your life, et cetera, and the balance of not doing that. And I found that was interesting. When you talk about communicating differently to engineers and executives and all of that, they all have their own language. They all have their own time frames of communication, the level of detail. The CEO may not want to know the ins and outs of the same things, the details you would have with the engineer. And it's kind of interesting. How do you, I'm sure you've had the conversations you've had. I've got to think some leaders try to be a chameleon, right? To be all things to all. And I would think that would be such a struggle. It would be such a challenge. And what types of things have you found that people struggle with that, with being able to communicate with those different audiences at different levels?
Absolutely. And part of the problem there is exactly what you said, that they are trying to be all things to all people. Where any good business coach, and I imagine you also counsel your authors, this as you're discussing titles and book covers, that yes, what you're saying may be applicable to every person that has ever lived and ever will live in the universe. And if you write a book titled something like The Answer to the Universe and Everything for Everyone Who Ever Has, Is, and Will Live, a few people are going to pick it up because they're curious, how are you covering all of that ground? And most people are looking at it and saying, that's not who I am, and they're going to pass on by. Where if you niche it down to, this is the leadership book for executives who love pet turtles and only work with engineers who have been in the industry for 35 plus years, that's a very specific market that the however many 150 or 1,000 some whatever the number is people who meet that are kind of like, oh my gosh, that's exactly me. And they're going to pick it up. And then everyone else.
It's written just for me.
And a lot of other people will probably pick that up saying this, that is such a specific book. I'm really curious what's so special about them. I'm going to read it and then find out that it all applies to them as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say they're just out of curiosity. They're going, what the heck is that? But you're absolutely right. We tell people that, because a lot of authors come to us and we say, who's your target market? And they'll say, well, everyone. I mean, everyone can benefit from this. And then we have to make them understand that, yes, typically a book for everyone is really a book often for no one. And that you really do need to create a niche, even though, yes, the book may be applicable, beyond that. And that's true, not just in choosing the title and the cover and things like that, but it's also true in the languaging inside the book. So one of the first books we published was a book by an author named Frank Lies. And Frank is a financial advisor. And throughout his book on financial wellness, he uses a number of references from Proverbs, because there's a lot of financial wisdom in the Bible, and and it was very interesting because we were looking at his reviews, and one of his Amazon reviews said, "Oh my goodness, this book is the best book I've ever read." And she went on to call out some of those biblical principles. Well, it was very clear. Like, I don't think Frank believes that his book is the best book ever written. Like, I promise you, he doesn't believe that. Um, but clearly, his languaging deeply resonated with this person who left this review. And had he chosen to just take kind of a neutral ground and try to appeal to everyone, then he would have only appealed to everyone at a marginal level instead of appealing to some people at a very deep level. And we need that deep level of connection to bring about change. Someone who thinks, well, that information is pretty good, is not going to change their life based upon pretty good. But they will change their life based on, wow, that was amazing. That really touched me. And so when people ask, gosh, should I include my faith in my book, right? Or should I include this story about this disability or struggle I've had in my book? It's like, absolutely, you should include that, because those are the things that are going to strike the deep chord within the reader to bring about change. And what's the point of bringing the message if we're not trying to bring about change?
100%. That's a perfect lead in to my next question of how do you build cultures and help your authors build stories where people feel safe and empowered to bring their unique talents into everything that they do?
Well, that's an interesting question, Michael. I think part of it is just getting them to share a story. Many people, especially in the business field, they'll start to write. They want to put all their wisdom down, and that's great. That's really important. But as you know, stories are so much more powerful. I can tell someone, go do this, but if I can tell them a story about when someone else did that, that's going to be far more powerful. So part of the struggle, or part of the first thing we need to do, is just get the authors to add stories to their books. And once authors see it, they get it. Like, they're like, oh, I totally understand what you mean. And so then they'll often go back and write stories into their book. Examples of what happened with this client or this person or that type of thing to help make that wisdom come home. Now, but that's only answers part of your question. The other part of your question was getting them to help foster open communication, sincere being among other people. And I think that's a tougher nut to crack, and sometimes one that's beyond our abilities as a publisher to do, unfortunately. But I think that the inclusion of stories definitely helps people feel more free to share their own stories.
How do you encourage authors who may be a little afraid to share those deeply personal stories to open up and become willing enough to include enough of those to make the story compelling?
That's interesting. You made me think of one of our authors, Ruth Rathblott, and Ruth was born with as a birth defect with one arm where she has just a nub of a hand, and she spent the first 20 years of her life plus probably trying to hide it, and she ultimately wrote a book. She's written a couple books now. One of them is called Unhiding. And what it talks about is how she spent, every time she was in a picture, she'd hide it. Every time she was talking with someone, her hand would be in her pocket. She never, it was the last thing she wanted anyone to ever see or discover. But when she started to share it, suddenly she found other people were hiding other things in their lives. And her sharing of this helped to inspire others to share, to unhide. And and so I think that that's a valuable story and a valuable lesson. And quite frankly, if we're dealing with an author that really has something deeper that they need to go into, and if we're spotting that, it's that kind of a story that I think helps them. But that's true in so many things. If we can share our struggles, other people will be more willing to share their struggles, and then we can work on them. We can work on those things together. But if we're just hiding the struggle, then we really can't.
For leaders who are struggling to determine for themselves, how much of my story do I share at work generally? How much of my story do I bring into this particular conversation or presentation? How do I decide what's right in any particular context?
Yeah, that was the same challenge that you and Melissa Apple were discussing, I think, and I've got to think it still comes down to target market, and it's weird to think about your coworkers as target market, but it is. They are a part of your target market. It may be a different target market than the product you're selling, or the message that you're getting out to the world, but it still needs to be evaluated through a filter, and that is, okay, what is the language I can use that's going to help, and what is the information I'm going to use that is going to help facilitate this communication and a positive outcome for us all, and without burdening them with details that are unnecessary and that that don't advance the cause for either of you. Kind of like what you were talking about, communicating with an executive versus an engineer, right? The engineer, it's all details. The engineer wants to know, how is this going to be done, and what are the details? And the executive wants to know, it's like, no, why are we doing it, and can it be done, and what's that going to cost or take, without getting into the minutia of things. And that's true. And that kind of filtering, I think, happens in every conversation we have, whether that's with our 5-year-old at home, or our peer in the workplace, or the person who determines whether we are employed or not. I think that same kind of filtering happens all the time. And honestly, it's got to be one of the most incredible learned behaviors that we are capable of. The complexity of those decisions that we make often on the fly and subconsciously are in my mind, are a proof that we are miraculous beings.
I like that characterization. I also really like this framing of our coworkers and organization as different target markets. It gives a very different way to visualize who they are and to think about how to optimize their interactions with them. And we have an advantage over a lot of companies that we know exactly who that full set of target market is. It's way easier in most cases to go do. It's way easier in most cases to go do some of that research.
Yeah, we basically we eat lunch with these people. We may spend time with them socially. We get insight into them that we don't get insight into our clients per se, because we probably don't get the chance to spend that kind of deep, how would I say, not unfiltered, that's not the right word, vulnerable communications that we get that we may get with some of our coworkers and teammates.
And at the same time, it can actually seem much harder to get some of those details from our coworkers than it is to go out to some random people we'll never see again and ask them virtually the same questions.
I suppose so. I mean, there are walls everywhere, right? People put up, and it's got to be one of the greatest challenges of a leader is knowing where, is knowing how much intimacy to establish. Like I have to just tell you, as an employer, I'm always asking myself the question, okay, how far do I go with this conversation? How far do I go with this piece of information with one of my employees? How much do I share? How much do I not? Because I want to have a great relationship, but I also don't want to endanger the fact that we have an effective working relationship. And so that I think those are waters always to be navigated by an employer, particularly.
Yes. What is the business value? And here again, I'll ask you both for you as a business and as you're working with people on their businesses through the books, and then also in terms of the business of the book, of creating these cultures where people are bringing as much of their full self in as they want to be bringing.
Well, I mean, you've got to think about it. If we don't create a culture that allows creativity, then all we will ever have is what we had yesterday. All we'll ever have is the status quo. And sometimes the status quo is good, and that's what we need. Sometimes in times of trouble, it's good to have the status quo, but we'll never advance the company. We'll never advance our businesses, and we won't advance our staff if everything has to be the status quo. One of the phrases that just rankles me, and I understand it, and I've said it a million times myself, but when somebody proposes a new idea and someone else responds with, "Well, yeah, but that's the way we've always done it." And someone will say, "Hey, we need to change this. We need to do this process differently." And someone says, "No, but that's the way we've always done it." Like that is some objective reason to continue to do it. We've always done it this way, so automatically we should always do it this way going forward. And if you have a culture where people are afraid to share and afraid to go deeper, then that's all you will ever get is, well, we've always done it that way. That's the way we're going to always do it. Even if that means driving you and the company and the employees into the ground. So instead, I just feel like we should always be evaluating, okay, yes, we've always done it that way. Why did we choose to do it that way? Because that may still be the way to do it, right? Did we make a positive choice to do it that way in the past because we needed to? And do the same limitations and things like that exist to cause us to continue to do it that way? Or have the variables changed and have the opportunities changed? And do those cause us to reevaluate doing something in a different way? So yeah, that phrase kills me. And yet I can tell you, Michael, I've used it plenty of times myself. But that's where I think culture really benefits us, is if we can move beyond it's the way we've always done it.
You're the first person I've heard describe it that way. And I really like this distinction of, if we aren't able to be creative, then it's really challenging, maybe impossible, to move the business forward, to move our career forward, to move the project we're working on forward. If the solution was obvious, we wouldn't need a team full of smart people to find a way to solve it.
Yeah, you're right. We could have just automatons doing everything, because that's the way we've always done it.
This idea of creativity is necessary to move the business forward is a really good reason to bring play into the workforce and into the work of writing a book. That if we're not able to bring that playful demeanor to it, attitude, then we're going to have a really hard time finding those creative solutions that are what really blow the doors open and let us have those innovative solutions.
Yeah, you make me think of, Michael, how, of course, it became the stereotype of the .com era to have these workplaces where you had ping pong tables and foosball tables and beanbag chairs and and all these unstructured spaces and unstructured time in order to foster that creativity. But I don't know that that's necessary to create that creativity, right? It's at its core, it's got to be from a leadership standpoint of not poo-pooing creativity, some leaders are, very, very capable of going, nope, I like the way we've done it. We're going to just keep doing it that way. It's worked for X number of years. It's going to continue to work. Let's keep going that way. And sometimes those decisions, of course, are appropriate. But if that's the way you always respond to everything, you're never going to get that great idea that totally improves the paradigm in your company. And your employees are going to quit coming to you with ideas because they're like, oh, no. They just say no every time, so I'm not coming to them with this amazing idea or invention I just thought of.
And the way that we have always done things isn't the way we have always done things, because at some point the business didn't exist, and so no one was doing things this way. So the way that
is a great way to say it.
What now going. Is the way we have always done things was at one point the crazy new idea that no one believed would work.
Yeah, that's right. Think about podcasting. So I don't remember exactly when podcasting was invented, but I know it had a heyday somewhere around 2007, 2008. Where people were talking like, oh, podcasts are the thing. And then about 5 years later, podcasts were no longer the thing. And they were like, yeah, whatever. And so and then they have had this huge resurgence, and they are now the thing more than they ever were the thing. And spoken word is growing by double digits every year, whereas the written word is, in some genres is decreasing, but spoken word's going crazy. But there was a time where it'd be very easy to say, well, that's how we did it, so this is how we're going to keep doing it. But things keep changing, and so like you said, this is the way we've always done it is really only semi-true, because there was a time where it wasn't done at all, or it was the brand new idea. I mean, think about it. Somebody said, it would be pretty amazing if we created this tool called a search engine that would somehow scrape the internet in order to help people find websites, right? Someone came up and created the first search engine. By the way, it wasn't Google. Right. And I don't know if it was Netscape or I don't remember who the first search engine was, but can you imagine if that idea had never come out just because somebody poo-pooed it? And no, that's not how we do it. There's and obviously millions of inventions like that.
I just learned today that the webcam was invented because there were researchers or engineers, I forget, who got tired of walking down to the kitchen to see if there was coffee in the coffee pot. So they rigged up a camera in the kitchen that would hook up to their computer so they could just look from their screen and know if there was coffee there or not.
That is incredible. That is what a great story. It wasn't invented to keep an eye on something halfway around the world, and it wasn't invented so that you and I could talk, have a video phone call. It was meant to see if there was coffee in the coffee maker.
Can you get any more
That's
quotidian
awesome.
for something that has completely transformed the world? COVID would have been very different without
I love it.
webcams.
No. And then it's kind of like you've probably heard the story about how Post-it notes were created, right? There was some guy at 3M, and his job was to be the engineer of glues, right? And he ultimately created this batch of glue that was no good because it wouldn't permanently adhere, but then started using it to keep pieces of paper stuck to his desk or his screen or whatever. And then they went, oh, hey, maybe this is a product. Maybe we can do something with it. And now, Post-it notes are superfluous. And now we've even had to create digital Post-it notes, right? So amazing.
Yes. Everyone today has a lot of change, uncertainty, and overwhelm. The authors that you're working with, in many cases, this is many times magnified because they're trying to write a book, which they often have never done before, and navigate that whole world. How do you help people in your company, your authors, the people that you meet every day, find their way through all of that?
Yeah, this is what's nice. One of the things that we are now, I think we're approaching 200 published books and well over 200 authors in this. And it's great that I get to tell every author when they first start working with us, hey, you know what? This isn't our first rodeo. Like, we're not learning how to do this while we're doing your book. We're not paving the runway while the airplane's rolling down it, kind of a deal. And so it helps. I have an excellent project manager who sees everything through, and we've developed a process that we know works that ushers the author through in an orderly fashion. From planning to title and subtitle development to cover, the cover process, which you asked me about the cover process when we're done, to the editing and the layout, publishing it so it's available, essentially worldwide, and taking them through an Amazon bestseller launch. It is a seamless process. And I love it because that's what I hear our authors saying when they go to put an Amazon or a Google review up of our company. If you want to search Ignite Press on online, you'll find our Google reviews, and you'll see them over and over speak to process. That they have the process, they know how to do it, and they guide, and they'll say, yeah, and they guided me through this process. So it's just and that process, by the way, continues to evolve. We are never stuck with, but that's the way we've always done it. We're always improving the process. Even last week, we had an issue come up that we've never had happen before. So, Amazon threw us a curve, and that caused us to look at our process and go, okay, is there a way we can communicate this better? Is there a way we can be in front of this instead of reacting to it? So it becomes another part of our process. And every challenge we encounter, is an opportunity to make our process better. Our clients have made our process better, and our clients will continue to make our process better.
What you have is not just a process for publishing a book and guiding author through everything that entails, you also have a process for improving your process. And knowing that both are in place, I'm
I
sure it
guess
helps
that's a
your
good way to say
authors.
that. Yeah, and the hard part is, you know, with authors, these books are their babies, right? Most of our clients, this is their first book. They've been wanting to write this book sometimes for decades. They've been working on this book sometimes for months, sometimes for many years, and they care deeply about it, and that's completely understandable. And so the decisions about the book become deeply personal decisions. And, there are times where, what we recommend and what they want to see happen are different. And there are times where, inevitably, no matter what work you do and how well you do it, there will be times where challenges come up, where problems come up. And one of them is simply because we're working with, these companies the size of Amazon and Google and, things like that, things that we cannot control. But if we can see every problem as a potential to improve, then we'll get better. And the funny thing is, we should see them in a positive. I'd like to tell you, Michael, that we go, oh, hey, there's a problem. Oh, great, that's an opportunity for it to be us to make it better. Obviously, that's not how we think. We go, oh no, there's a problem. What are we going to do? That type of thing. But we're incentivized to try to minimize the likelihood of that problem happening again, and that's where it's that whole idea of, okay, well, is there another way we can do this? Is there a way we can be better about it? So yes, I suppose you're right. We don't just have a process for publishing books. We have a process for improving our process.
And that is a piece I find missing in many teams and many places generally, especially in teams so they try to invent this every single time. They do it completely differently. And then they're frustrated of why can we never make change around here?
Yeah, I have to say there was a time our company started as a marketing company. It was called the Solution Machine. And the idea was, if you have a problem, we will find a solution. Okay. And we did that for about 5 years before we started getting into publishing. And when we finally started doing publishing, I very gladly dropped the marketing components of what we were doing, because we were doing Main Street marketing and doing marketing for all different kinds of people and industries. And I felt like every single time was reinventing the wheel, what you just described. Every time it was like, okay, what are we going to do with this one? How are we going to do it? Everything was completely different. Whereas we ultimately found something that we could scale better because it was a repeatable process, not an easy process. I mean, it's a process with lots of details and lots of variables, but it's at least a process where we can go from here to there and we know how we're going to get there. Whereas, quite honestly, when we were a general marketing agency, that repeatable process was much harder to find.
For people, Everett, who would like to learn more about working with you to publish their book or talk more about all the leadership principles we've talked about today, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, a couple ways. One is just go to our website. That's ignitepress.us, ignitepress.us, and you'll see a button there to schedule a consultation directly with me. And I always enjoy meeting new people and learning about their ideas for a book. And it's appropriate for us to have a conversation with someone everywhere from someone who's already published, but is wondering what else they can do with their book, or if there's some advantage to publishing it differently, to the person who it just has an inkling that they need a book and they don't even know yet what they're going to write it about, but they understand the power of what a book will do for their business or brand. So go to ignitepress.us and we can schedule a talk. The other thing, Michael, is I created an opportunity for your listeners to get a free copy of my book, The Power of the Published. In this book, I tell people, I show people all the different ways that a book can benefit a business or a brand, and also talk about different publishing options and methods to make that happen, and also even some rapid writing methods. And those are all in my book, The Power of the Published. And if people will go to mypodcastperk.com, that's mypodcastperk.com, they can get a free copy of the book there, free digital version, and an opportunity to access other versions as well.
That's great. Thank you, Everett. And we will have all those links in the show notes. What would you like to leave our
Thank you
audience
so
with
much.
today?
I think that obviously I discussed what I see our role is as helping support the messenger, that we don't feel like we are Moses. We are Aaron and Hur holding up the arms of Moses. But what I find with a lot of people who are considering writing a book is a hesitation, because they know what a book would do for their business or brand, or they have a message they want to carry to the world, but they're always worried, is that message important enough? Is it unique enough? Hasn't everything that's worth saying already been said? And those types of things, kind of that whole imposter syndrome gets really into people's heads. And I like to use this example is, in Australia, right, they have these rookeries of all these penguins, right? There's a million penguins or something like that. Somehow, over all of the cacophony, all the sound of the different penguins crying out, somehow the mother penguin and the child penguin will find each other through all of that noise. That, I believe, is true when it comes to this world we live in and the message that can be shared through a book. There are people out there that if you do not share the message, they will never hear it. Is the message available elsewhere? Perhaps. Has somebody else said that message before? Perhaps. But there are people out there whose ears are attuned only to your voice, whether it's some strange combination of your experience and beliefs and their experience and beliefs that tunes the two of you together. So when people say, goodness, who am I to publish this book? Who am I to share this message? I ask, who are you to withhold it? Who are you to keep this person from learning the wisdom that you have to share? So I think that is the ultimate message to be left.
100%. I say all the time, whoever you are, the world is clamoring to have you in their life. And there's a corollary
That's
that
nice.
If you don't give them the opportunity to enjoy having you in their life, you are harming yourself and you're harming them.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I love it because what you're telling me and you're sharing with others, you're not just talking about their message. You're not just talking about their wisdom. You're talking about their being, right? Because you're talking about being in their life. That's a very deep and powerful thing you've just said there.
Thank you. Thank you, Everett, for a wonderful conversation today.
Thanks again for having me on. I appreciate being a guest on your podcast, Michael.
And thank you, audience, for joining us today. Everett and I would love to know, what story is just bursting to get out of you that you're not sure how to let loose? Thanks, and have a great day.